How we looking, Devin? We looking okay?
Let's see. I'm not seeing you yet. All right, fellas, you're live.
No, we're live. We're live. We're just letting people take the time to come on in and,
All right, I see we got some comments coming in and people are joining. Thank you everybody for joining us immediately following our Learn with the Nerds event for data modeling.
Absolutely.
So the goal in here, as everybody is joining, is we're going to be jumping in and answering some questions. We see a lot of information about slowly changing dimensions. So yes, Casey, we'll definitely have to take a look at adding some YouTube videos around that. So make sure that you're subscribed to our channel so you'll see those when they come out. We have a lot of questions that we got as a result of the training event itself. So we're going to go through some of those questions, and then I think we're going to go through the live chat and see what other questions we get there as well. As we get started, do you want to tell them about our ODL and the fabric analyst in today?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously a full little session there, really good session on modeling. Hopefully everybody's feeling good about that. Don't forget, right, with our on-demand learning, we've got tons of other classes to accompany this. This very class actually is already on the on-demand learning, so you can rewatch that at your leisure, at your pace, however you want to go, 1.5 it, 0.75 speed, whatever you want to do. And don't forget, we've got a plethora, tons of other Power BI classes that are available. And actually, they'll be free throughout the weekend. So if you don't already have an account with us for on-demand learning, make sure you sign up for a trial, right? The trial gives you that kind of set amount of time, but it's a good time to explore if Power BI is really an area of interest that you're really wanting to dive into. If this kind of, wet your beak, talking about data modeling, there's so many more classes we have available. So make sure you take advantage of that. And you got something special for that too, right?
So specifically, the code. Yeah, we'll talk about the code. The fabric analyst in a day, we're going to have on our website starting next week. So if you want to learn more about fabric and what that's about and really dive into that, the Fabric Analyst in a Day course is awesome, and it'll make you feel very comfortable with that. So we'll get that next week. It'll be live on our platform. So definitely want to point that out. If you're interested in our on-demand learning and you never experienced it before, we have over 170 classes, as Manuel was saying. So you can go out there and you can look at that. You can use my code to get a 40% discount on that. So that's Mitchell40. It's on the site right now. It's on the video. You can see that. Mahesh asked, how long will this session be? We're going to be on here for probably about 30 minutes, Mahesh, answering questions or until we run out of questions. So we'll see whichever one comes first. So that's great. And then,
well, you know what's 40% discounts is pretty good, right? It's a great discount. Take advantage of it. But there's one thing that's a little bit better than 40%. Well, there's probably a bunch of percentages. Free is better than 40%. And at the end of this little live, we're going to give away 3 licenses, guys. 3 ODL licenses. It's going to be for a kind of year subscription there. And it's all about comments. So as you guys are here with us, kind of adding in those comments in here, there's going to be a raffle at the very end for 3 of them. So stay active. You guys are great in the last section. So keep that activity going on here. And who knows, can win you a little prize.
And the other thing is, if you sign up right now on our website for our on-demand learning, all of our Power BI classes, anything Power BI related, it's actually going to be free through the weekend. So you can go out there and watch those classes for free.
Most definitely. So where do we want to start? So many questions.
We had a lot. Let's look at some of the questions from the event, and then we'll jump back over here and take a look at these questions that are popping in.
How about this one? Let's kind of pop this on the screen there, right? What about many-to-many relationships? Are they all right? How do we deal with them?
So we talked about that in the video a little bit. You do have many-to-many relationships that do exist in a mature Power BI model, right? Or any model, not just Power BI. They do exist, but what we want to try to avoid here is we don't want to have a direct relationship between 2 tables that have a many-to-many relationship. In other words, if I have customer key over here many times and customer key over here many times, I don't build a direct relationship between those 2 tables. So those are situations where, depending on the situation, we might have to build some kind of bridge table, similar to what we did in the video, where we had to say, hey, category won't work because category is in this table many times, it's in this table many times. So we built that category segment table to facilitate that relationship.
Absolutely.
So you don't want to build direct relationships where you have a many directly to another many.
And then more recently with Power BI, we probably can't go into too much depth into this right now because it seems like in the most recent update for Power BI, we just noticed something new with that. We haven't fully tested it. We haven't explored it ourselves, but some of you are up to date and up to the moment with Power BI's frequent updates. We have a new feature when it comes to many-to-many. We weren't able to just explore it today in today's session because it is so new, but it's a new approach of allowing the ability of actually making that direct relationship. But the key is we can control the filter direction, which was the whole purpose of a bridge table. But we still got to explore that one. And maybe in a future video, we can go a little deeper on that.
Yeah, I don't even know if we can see it on here if we tried to show it, but I don't know the full scope of the ramifications of this. But what Manuel is alluding to is if you do a many-to-many relationship between two tables in Power BI, unfortunately, you've always been limited to the fact that the relationship automatically will go in both directions. And it would not let you change it to say, hey, I know that this, yes, it's a mini side, but I want this side to filter that side and only in that direction. Because when you have a many-to-many, it can cause some ambiguity. It can cause some confusion. It can make your DAX calculations not quite show up correctly. So this is what we're talking about right here, where if this were a many-to-many like this is, as defined, you can actually say, hey, it is a many-to-many, but I want this mini side to filter this side only. Now, I'm not recommending that we leverage this. This is something that we actually need to explore on our side and figure out what's going on with that. But this is one of the main reasons why we built those bridge tables in the past, was to solve that problem.
Very cool. Like I said, we just kind of stumbled across that I think like 2 days ago. So definitely something we could explore in the future. So we'll just kind of go in order. What do you think? We got this next one right here.
On Fabric at some point. So to answer that question, we have had a session on Fabric.
We have one of our colleagues, right? Austin, I think he had a session. It's been a couple of months, and
it has been, and it's changing fast.
Fabric's changing fast, so definitely keep your eyes peeled. We'll definitely have a session more than likely coming in the future. For any of you fabricators out there loving Fabric, what it's all about, there's a huge conference that's coming. We just had a huge conference, but there's another massive conference that's going to be coming in the end of March, the beginning of April, and we suspect a plethora. Right, a load of changes and announcements there. So a good possibility that we see a session possibly after that with some really cool up-to-date content.
I'm hoping to go to that conference too.
That'll be exciting.
FabricCon in March.
Stop by.
I should be there at our booth.
All right, so we got Fabric conversation. Let's see what we have. We have another one here about fact tables, creating measures. You know, always an interesting conversation, right? Where do we do some of the work, right? Columns and fact tables versus creating measures. And I think the idea here is, do we add calculated columns? Do we calculate aggregate values and kind of make it static?
So it depends, right? This is an interesting one because you can definitely get into some pretty heavy debates around this one. There's definitely an argument to say, all right, we have sales. Let's just use a basic example, a simple example here. So let's say that you have a sales table, and in that sales table, you have sales and you have cost. And we all know that profit is essentially going to be sales minus cost. So we could build a measure in Power BI that's profit, that is doing a sum X over the table, row by row, taking the sales, minusing the cost, and then at the end we sum it all up and we have profit within the current filter context. We could do that. The only problem with that is that if we're building every aggregation out that way, when that was a very simple calculated column we could have built, you might end up with a model where you have 2,000 measures. You have measure bloat. But on the other side, if you add that as a column where you say, okay, I know that profit is sales minus cost, so you build a new column. I would recommend not building it in DAX because it's going to be better as a best practice to build it back in Power Query, build it back even further upstream. But if you build the column, then you can build a very simple measure on top of it that's just straight profit. And I guess in that situation, you still are building a measure on top of it. So it depends on that one, but I personally like to be able to build those individual pieces in columns that I can sum up and do more things with in the future. So I'd probably in that situation build a column, but you'd be okay for the most part if you built measures there. What do you think?
No, agreed. And I think a big factor here too is like when you think about measures and aggregations, like you said, you can go deeper. We didn't, there's aggregate tables we can get into, and that's a whole nother concept. But storage is a big piece too. The more you start adding columns in, the more storage you're adding to the model, more space you're taking up, more refresh time. It's kind of like storage engine versus that formula engine. Like where do we want to hit it the most? But there's situations. I think the situation one versus another.
All right.
Let's keep on moving down the list here. So when we need to add some filters, let's see what we got here.
What's this one? So When we need to add filters in our dashboard, is it better to get them from the dim tables or the facts? So this is a great one. Name is redacted. Not quite sure, but I probably do know why. Actually,
you know why. You know.
I do know why. So this is a good one. The problem is that a lot of times we build those dimension tables. One, those attributes, those original descriptive attributes shouldn't be still in the fact table. And it will absolutely cause confusion down the road, because when we start writing DAX, when you get to the next step of data modeling, it's really starting to add DAX to add analytical value to your model. Well, a lot of times what we're doing in DAX is we're building measures that are changing the filter context inside of Power BI, right? And so I'm changing the filter context on the customer table, the attribute that was on the customer table, the geography, the country. And then when you pull in the country from the fact table, I didn't change the filter context of that. Yeah. So now the results are just wonky, they're bizarre.
Yes.
So my recommendation there is, once you build very well-defined and good dimension tables, make sure to get rid of those columns that are in your fact table that are descriptive. They shouldn't be there anyway. Once I have the geography key there, any kind of descriptive capability that I want should be coming from the dimension, not from the fact tables. Yeah. Donald actually just said that. I'm with you, Donald.
Yeah.
We should not have that filtering in the fact tables.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just hide them, right?
Yeah. Filter from the dimension tables. And even if you can get away with doing it in the fact table, which on small models that are really quick, you can.
Yeah.
Once you start building DAX, it's going to cause confusion once you start adding that on top of it.
Definitely. And just in case I did see a comment up here. Good to answer for Crystal. Conquers the world. Yes, M is going to be Power Query. It's the transformative language of Power BI, and DAX is that analytical language of Power BI. So spot on. You got it exactly right there.
All right.
So continuing here, question on granularity, right? So the way when we see the question, how do I configure what level of granularity should be stored? It almost relates to a question we saw just here in the chat too, about how do we know what kind of what questions do we need to ask customer for requirements? Yeah. They're kind of like tied together here when you think about this.
Yeah, I wonder, it says configure. It doesn't say necessarily how do I figure out. So, from the perspective of what level should I store the detail of my data at, I would recommend the lowest level of detail, as we discussed in the video. As a consultant for Pragmatic Works, before I moved into training, I've gone to customers that built their fact tables at a higher level of granularity, like the day level, the month level. And unfortunately, they had to rebuild their entire data model, because they couldn't answer all the questions they needed to answer with their data. And so from that perspective, you want to go down to the lowest level of detail if you can. I get that if you say, Mitchell, we have 5 billion rows of data, we just can't fit it in Power BI. Yeah. Can we aggregate that up? Power BI is a little more forgiving than traditional BI models, where you might be working on a data model for 3 months. As far as how do you configure it? Well, if you're trying to figure out how to go down to the lowest level, that's probably going to be based on where you're pulling the data from. I don't think that's what they were asking, but you just don't aggregate the data up as you're pulling it in.
Gotcha. Let's look at another one from the session from earlier, and then we can start looking at some of the questions that are in the chat.
Okay.
I think we kind of covered this pretty well inside the recording itself about what happens when we have more than one fact table, right? And in this one, budget fact came into play. Nick brought some conversations onto that. Anything else around multiple fact tables that we need to be concerned about? I remember there was also a question in there about, if we have multiple facts, should we try to join them together? And
I remember that about joining together to do multiple, like a month to dates or something like that. So this is good. First of all, let's think about what other fact tables would have been. We had fact sales, we had fact budget, we could have had fact inventory. Yep. That would have been a separate table that tracks our inventory levels. We could have had fact returns. Maybe we're returning data. So I want to see, it's definitely in a mature data model, whether it's in Power BI or not, we want to have multiple fact tables, and we want to have that ability of building dimensions that drill across multiple fact tables. So I can have product, and product filters fact sales, and product filters fact returns, and I can see exactly what my sales are for this quarter for that product, and I can simultaneously see exactly in the same visualization what my returns are for that product. Now, the question that we got that I think you were alluding to that built on that from the YouTube session was something along the lines of they wanted to do month to date for both of the tables, right? And so let me think about how you would do that. So year to date, month to date, I definitely would not recommend combining those two fact tables. Normally what you would do is you would just build the two separate month to date measures and just add them together, right? I'd have month to date sales, month to date inventory. And if you wanted to add them together for some reason, you build a third measure that just says, add those together. Now, Thule was very active in the YouTube video, and I've seen some chats here from Thule as well. Multiple facts, same granularity between them is important if relating things. Exactly correct, Thule. So in the YouTube video, we purposefully chose a separate fact table that was at a different grain, right? Our transactions were by day, by individual transaction, by line item. Our budget was by, I think, month maybe, or year. It's at a much higher granularity. And so that's where we ran into the problem that Thule's talking about here is we couldn't easily build a relationship from like the product because it wasn't at the product level, it was at a higher level. So we had to build an additional. So it's okay to be at a different granularity. That happens, and that's why we showed it when you have multiple facts. But you either solve it through your data model like we did, or you have to do it through DAX. You have to write DAX calculation to actually break that down.
And what we'll do just in case, guys, because we took questions from the YouTube, and now we're kind of moving through the live chat now.
Scroll back up a little bit.
So if you did have some questions, because there's actually a ton of chats up there. If you had some questions, maybe post them in here, and we'll see them come back through because we're eyeing it up real tight now. Let's take a look. Right here, we have actually questions coming in from Elro. Should we use surrogate keys for table relationships, or just use the natural keys? I think sometimes too, some of the terminology, like surrogate keys, primary keys, business keys, sometimes these things get kind of mixed together. And I think maybe breaking that down could be helpful here.
Elro crushed it though. So definitely I could tell that Elro understands exactly what those keys are. The natural key is, and there is some synonymous terms here, right? Typically your natural key is your primary key. It's the business key that's coming from your source table. So if you look back at your source table and you have products, you might have on that table that original product key, whatever it was, the UPC code, maybe. There's different products, a weird one because there's a bunch of different keys it could be. But let's just say we have product key. When I pull that into my dimension table, that is my natural key. That is my business key. For Power BI, Elro, most of the time, the natural key, the business key is actually okay because we're not dealing with slowly changing dimensions.
I was going to say, you're about to hit on something that was frequently asked.
Yeah. Well, when we brought that up, we really opened up the doors to a lot of questions. So in that situation, I think you're definitely okay. Just go with the natural key, because keep in mind, if you do build a surrogate key on that dimension table in Power BI, you now have to map the surrogate key over to the fact table to make it work. So you're adding another layer of complexity there when it's just not necessary in a Power BI model.
Absolutely.
Now, if we get into more of an enterprise model, like here at Pragmatic Works, we have some models that are built in Azure SQL database. We have ETL processes that load those models. So we have surrogate keys, but we also have the ETL processes in the background to make sure all of that stays up to date.
Yeah.
So anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, like you said, it's kind of the degree of complexity of what you're working with. And at the Power BI level, at the end of the day, when you think about the breakdown of dimensions and facts, in the dimension, like I said, all these different names for keys, we need a unique identifier for that table to relate to that fact table. Right. If the natural key serves that purpose, then you use that natural key. But in more advanced scenarios where that could be in play for you, that maybe it's SED2, which means just in case that's where you're retaining history, you could have duplicates of the product key. And that's because there's like a current version of it and like an expired or historical version. So in that case, it's not technically a unique identifier, which might sound funky. But we're kind of adventuring a little bit more in the advanced space of that. So we don't want to get too confusing, but we did see all those requests for SED2. So definitely something of consideration, maybe for a focus for a future YouTube video. So we definitely heard what you guys were saying. What do we see here? What do you think?
Let's look at that one. Yeah, let's look at that next one from John. Next one in the list is from John. It says, for multiple fact tables that are interrelated, sales order, purchase order, and then sales invoice, all three tables have the sales order. How would you best link them? That's an interesting one, John. So that a lot of times when you come from these like transactional systems, you'll have like a sales order table, and then you'll have a sales order detail table, and then you'll have maybe even a more detailed version of that. And the sales order table at the very top will have like the aggregated totals, like aggregated freight cost of that shipping or aggregated tax or something to that effect. And so what I prefer to do in Power BI, depending on the complexity of the model, I actually, John, would like to take that header row and actually combine the header and the detail if possible. Now, keep in mind that adds some complexity as far as how are we going to handle in that situation? How do we handle the freight? Because now I have maybe 10 line items or 10 detailed items, but I have a freight that's at the very top, right? So then I want to take that freight at the top, and do I distribute it evenly across all 10 records? What do I do with that? That part gets a little tricky. So John, I would, it becomes kind of hard in your situation to properly build the dimensions to those tables. So if possible, I would actually recommend trying to combine them.
All Perfect. Right. And we'll look to get those, we'll try to get the questions added on. There's like a little star thing, but I'm not seeing it right now is all. So we're just reading them out for you at the moment. Let me check here real quick. Maybe there's a route we can see here. All right, so we're going to have to go this route here.
Starred.
Perfect.
There we are. Devin Knight is in here telling us to go to the starred questions. Thank you, Devin. Nice. See you later. Call him out. He was right there.
He was right there.
Yeah,
you guys didn't see him.
So we're gonna. There's 140 questions. So he's telling us to focus on the starred questions because we're just hitting them all. We might have to do a second Q&A session or something after this.
I think you said we're either going to end when there's no questions or put a timer. I don't think it's
going to be
whichever
comes first. Whichever comes first. All right, next question. What do we got?
Any new license requirements for Fabric? Probably involves a little bit longer of a video, but the short and the quick about that one is there is some changes to capacities. Just in case, Fabric is all about either F SKUs, F capacity, Fabric capacity, P SKUs, premium capacities. That's what they stand for. And lastly, if you are able to have available a Fabric trial.
So you're saying yes.
It is. The weird part is just keep an eye so you're not caught off guard. The P SKUs are going away. So there was an announcement by Microsoft earlier this year. There will be no more premium SKUs. For those of you who have premium SKUs, and this is catching you off guard, don't worry. They're just basically going to roll over and everything's going to be Fabric SKUs.
Yeah. Long story short, if you're on Power BI Pro license today, you're sharing with people Power BI Pro. You can't use that with Fabric. So once you put your data in a lake house, once you put your data in a one lake in Fabric, you do have to be on an F SKU, a capacity. Now you can pause it. You can scale it up, you can scale it back. So there are ways to absolutely manage that cost. But if you get into that, the licensing absolutely does change. And that's something we talk about in the FIAD, in the Fabric Analyst in a Day class that's going to be free on our website for life. That class will be free for life on our website, and we'll be releasing that as early as next week.
Now going from Fabric back over to kind of modeling and stuff, we have the question of, and this is we have fun talking about some of our classes, right? When we're talking about transformation calculations, when should you use DAX? When should you use Power Query? Right. And, naturally Power Query is definitely it's the transformative language of Power BI. So you definitely have a bit more flexibility of true transformation. But there's also a component about storage and like compression and encoding that comes into play here.
Yeah. So exactly. And because of that, the best practice here, just to keep this is pretty easy to answer, right?
Yeah.
If you're creating new columns on your table that are going to support, if you create that profit column we talked about earlier, sales minus cost as a new calculated column, do it in the Power Query editor. If you're determining any new attributes or descriptive columns on your tables that are going to help you describe your data, maybe buckets or anything like that, do it in the Power Query editor. So if you're adding columns to a table, do it in the Power Query editor. It's going to give you better storage, better compression from Power BI. But if you're building actual calculated measures, year to date, year over year, rolling totals, those types of things, you can't do them in Power Query, right? They're not going to be dynamic. So that's kind of the clear indicator right there. Can I build this year to date calculation that's going to change with the filters? Can I do that in the Power Query editor? No. So you do it in DAX.
All the way. Kind of a bigger, general, more question here. Does your virtual mentoring help you complete a project? I'd say, yeah. You and I have both been with various customers. Maybe some of you are out there. Hello to all of our customers.
I'm sure there are. Yep.
We have some that have been with us. We've gone through years, multiple sessions, and we love seeing when the project is finished, they show us the final results. So.
Yeah, no, it's awesome because like you said, I have customers literally all over the world. I have a customer in France who I love. We've done multiple hackathons together. It's where essentially we want to teach you the technology, but also help you get through projects and solve real world problems. But the ultimate goal is that, we get to the point where you shake somebody's hand and say, hey, it's been great, but you no longer need us, right? We get to that point. But we definitely help people. If you call us up and you're like, hey, I have this DAX problem. I'm trying to build this data model. We need your help. We will help you with it, but we're going to teach you so you can take over and do it at the end. So the answer is absolutely. That's one of our favorite things to do, the virtual mentoring. Love doing it.
And seeing them like months later, a year later, oh, I remember this person. They come back in the event to see the growth. Always an amazing thing to witness.
Yeah.
Always good. So hopefully we'll see some of you in that virtual mentoring. This one's a long time DBA, 20 years on-prem, kind of keeping everything with that network, the server room, all that fun stuff. How do we start with Fabric? What's probably the best recommendation here?
Yeah, I think that I don't know. You can properly answer this question. I think the best thing to do is, even if you have been on-prem for the last 20 years as a SQL DBA, for me, I don't know that that's a weird one to be. If I'm honest, I wouldn't even say to go and start with Fabric. I would say I'd probably start with things like just basic data lake and a basic Azure SQL database. It's such an easy transition to what you already do today. You say, hey, I got data. We have new data that's coming from this third-party vendor, this software as a service provider who's in the cloud. I just need to move that data into a database that I can access that's ours.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to just put it in an Azure SQL database. It's going to be easy to connect to from tools like Data Factory or in pipelines within Fabric. You can easily connect to those software as a service providers. It's more designed for that.
Yeah.
And then you can move it somewhere like a data lake or move it into an Azure SQL database and access it. And that's where you start that migration and start that journey into Azure. But if you're going to be working with Fabric, you're thinking about, how do I do ETL? So it's going to be pipelines and data flows in Fabric, and then storing data in the one lake, and then building a lake house on top of it. So the Fabric Analyst in a Day is really good for that. But we also have some YouTube videos on Azure and an introduction to Azure focused specifically on SQL database and data lake.
Absolutely. So it's kind of like breaking it down, because Fabric's huge, right? Power BI is one piece of that pie. And if you go to the Analyst in a Day, that's what you'll get to see. It's for multiple personas, multiple roles. It's an entire end-to-end analytical solution. So focusing on SQL DB or data lake, right? That's going to get you accustomed to what storage is all about, getting accustomed to security and using, cloud services. Definitely a good beginning, but definitely you can always, on our website, we have a calendar that shows all of our in-a-day trainings.
Right.
So definitely check that out. There are a ton of Fabric Analyst in a Day events that you can sign up for. One of us will be there. Certain will like it.
All right. We'll see if we can, how many of these we can knock out quick. Fire questions.
What questions do we need to ask clients to understand the requirements best? Fire question, then we got to get this one right here.
Yeah, that's a longer one. But to be honest with you, I start just like this. Show me your existing reports. What is it that you love about these reports? What is it that you wish these reports could give you? That's the best place to start, because they know what they want and they know what they don't get. And of course, the other thing is they say, hey, we got people asking for this data, but we can't get the data because it's over there. And so once we start understanding that, we start understanding what the project is going to evolve into and what those steps are. So that's where I would start.
Yeah. Don't need to reinvent the wheel, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Things of success. Next one. We're going quick. Do you build dimension tables with Dataverse as source as well? I think it's just, the idea is, the answer there is yes.
Yeah. If you're pulling from Dataverse, you're pulling from Dynamics, you're pulling from Salesforce, wherever you're pulling from, you have a lot of information about your customer in there. You have a lot of information about your product in there. So you're going to pull out and take a lot of those tables and join them together, because dimension tables are typically going to be very wide, a lot of columns for descriptive purposes. So the answer is absolutely. Yeah.
What's your advice to organize all the measures you create so that you don't get too confused by tons of measures? I wonder, what's the route you take? I have a route. I wonder if it's the same.
I go back and forth on this. I actually had a customer recently who had them all in their main fact table, where you would normally think about it, and they had folders. But then they actually created a new fact table because they had changed to a different source. So they had gone from a source they shouldn't have been using to more of a SharePoint Excel file that would be more cloud ready. And they just created a new table. They deleted the old table. And I didn't even realize this. When they deleted that table and called me up, those measures were gone because they were associated with that. So that's a watch out for moment. A lot of people still prefer to create another table and just organize them accordingly in that, and then take advantage of display folders inside of the model.
Gotcha. That's the one I have started to adapt. If you guys aren't aware, if you go to the modeling view in Power BI, there is something called a display folder. It's right in the properties for anything. You can multi-select. And they've made some great improvements there. One thing that was missing, you couldn't be in the report view, make a new measure, and it directly be in that display folder. You always had to go back and add it. If you have a display folder, right click it, new measure, and it adds it in automatically. So they've made some nice quality of life.
I didn't know that.
Some great enhancements. I'm a big fan of display
folders. I didn't know you could do that. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good. Can you share tips on improving query performance in Power BI when dealing with real-time data? It's a tough one. Not really a...
So that is a tough one, but it also, if you're doing direct query has always been not super efficient. My recommendation there would be to look at Fabric, look at Direct Lake, because you can essentially get your data into Fabric and get it moving into your lake house in Fabric. And then you can do a direct lake connection, which is significantly better performance-wise than direct query. So you're doing direct query because your data is in a database, your data is in Dynamics or wherever it is. And either you need it real time or you need your model's just too big. But yeah, that's a longer question. I don't really have any great advice there.
No, I think that's spot on. I mean, direct lake, best of both worlds, best of direct query, best of imports. Yeah. If for some reason you can't go to Fabric, we mentioned aggregate tables at one point. This is more of a composite model approach. It's a little bit more work and effort, but that could improve performance. Leave the main detail fact table there just in case, but then you have an aggregated one that's imported. So there's some options. It's a pretty big question, but hopefully we gave you some kind of ideas around that.
And then I see Brian V. Congratulations. Use the code and purchased on-demand learning subscription. Shout out to Brian.
Hey, joining the family, the Pragmatic Works family.
What's this one by Jenna here?
Let's see what Jenna's got.
Can you talk about the directional flow of relationships? Today's exercise was to set up in one direction, but is that always how they should be set up? So simple answer, yes. There are some exceptions to that rule that I've had to do in some very advanced data modeling scenarios that I know is okay. But general answer to this, for 99% of people, 99% of data models, you should be going in single direction only and from the one side to the many side, right? That's pretty easy.
And usually, like you said, when you have to go in these niche routes, it's usually because of how the data is being presented. Like I remember once it was like some sort of metric element that was bound in a dimension, right? The main facts were here, but there was one little metric element in a dimension that needed to be broken by a different dimension.
Yes.
So we had to do something with directional filtering there. But in that case, sometimes it's go back and look at the model. Can we refactor this so we don't have to go that route?
Yeah, I would say avoid it. Yeah. And then I would say one more thing. We're definitely at 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Should we just go until Devin comes in here and tells us we have to stop? Should we just?
I mean, we could. The chats aren't stopping.
We got to give away ODL questions. We got to give away some. We got to give away
true.
some licenses too. Let's answer some more questions here. What else do we got?
Let's see.
How about we take turns? I'll answer one, you answer one, and we'll see how fast we can go.
We saw someone help someone with the display folders item. I'm just kind of catching here at the end.
Okay.
Then I know not to join a field. Just trying to find a question here at the end. We got any more, Devin? You're gonna throw us?
Start the giveaways.
Oh, he virtually barged right in.
I'm having fun. I wanted to answer more questions.
All right. Put some questions. Maybe we'll see some at the end.
How are we doing the giveaways? How does that work?
All right. So if you've been chatting, if you've been writing, you're in this entry. And it does actually favor those who put more entries. And I don't want to see some spamming in here right now. We're going to do 3. All right. We're going to do 3 entries in here. What we're going to do is you're going to see a name appear on the screen. Let me get rid of the item, the star that's on there. Devin, can you hook me up with that one? Where's that? So thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So it's going to pop up on the screen. Make sure you take a quick screenshot of this. We'll leave it up there for a moment. Get a screenshot. And you're going to go ahead and email this to marketing@pw.com.
Marketing. Spell it out. Pragmaticworks.com.
It's going to be Pragmaticworks. Marketing@pragmaticworks.com. We'll see if we can maybe get that in there for you, but you guys all know how to spell Pragmaticworks. These are our friends and families. And so take this screenshot and then send that over our way. The first winner, you have to.
You're going to make me pronounce it?
But yeah, you go first, I go second, you go third.
Congratulations to Yodit Katima. Does that sound good?
I think
close.
That's perfect. That's
pretty close. Free ODL license for a year. So we'll make sure to get back to you on that, and you'll be able to sign up and you'll have access immediately. That's awesome.
All right. Winner number 2. Oh, let's see who Hey, we answered a question here.
We did. We answered a question from Elro.
Congratulations, Elro. ODL license number 2. Snag that little screenshot in there and email that us over. We'll get you set up. And that leaves us
one more. Steven Jackson. Congratulations to Steven Jackson. You also are going to get an on-demand learning license from Pragmatic Works to our over 170 classes for the next year. Congratulations to Steven.
Awesome. So that kind of concludes the giveaways. I didn't see any chats here at the very end. I was trying to keep an eye, see if we could sneak one in there. But of course, we're going to have tons more sessions. We actually... We got a session coming up next month.
Can you tell us about that real quick? You got one.
Yeah. It's actually almost exactly a month away. It's right before Thanksgiving. It's gonna be with myself. So I'm gonna be doing a Learn with the Nerd sessions, and we're gonna be visiting paginated reports.
Yeah.
Right. So we've done something like this before. I'm a little excited about this one because for those who've been in that space of like SSR rests, paginated reports, it's not a tool that gets a lot of love and updates, right? It still serves a very real purpose and a real point. I mean, it's kind of been the same-ish since 2016, really. Now, adding in and connecting to semantic models, great addition, right? But we really haven't seen much since. But we're going to look at paginated reports here, taking advantage of a new feature that just became GA about a month ago. It was a new download, and it brings the Power Query Editor experience into the paginated report builder. So not that it's a negative thing, but you don't necessarily have to build a semantic model, right? Paginated has like 6 or 7 organic sources you can connect to. And then if you don't see it there, you've got to go to Power BI, do your stuff, model it, do everything, and then you connect. So there's like a process. Now you can just connect. You have access to tons of different sources right within the paginated report builder. You can leverage the Power Query Editor. Some of the things you saw today for transforming the data, you can do. These are not things we've ever had available, right? They're still not a model in the traditional sense, but it's a really cool thing. So we're going to explore basically building out a paginated report, seeing how that works. There's some nuances around it, so I want to make sure everyone feels familiar with that, parameters and fun stuff. And also, we'll take a quick little glance at how you can do a paginated report right through the service too.
All right, that's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to that. A lot of people are like, they're looking forward to it. I'll say one thing. I'm seeing a lot of questions about different classes. Can we do Power Automate? Can we do Power Apps? Can we do this? And Fabric. Don't sleep on our YouTube channel. We've actually been doing these Learn with the Nerds events for a couple of years now. And so some of the questions y'all are asking, we have 2-3 hour sessions out there that you can go and watch, including on Power Automate. We have a lot. Jonathan Silva on our team, Nate, they do a lot of great work with Power Automate, and they got a lot of really cool YouTube videos on our channel. So I would just encourage you to definitely check that out and make sure you like and subscribe so that when we do those videos in the future, you get notified. And
then just in case, I saw Scott ask, we do have some YouTube videos there on AI and Power BI as well.
We do
have that. So definitely check that out in kind of our archive of videos, which we got tons of. So, but yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. And like I said, the next session will be, as of right now, November 21st, same time, 11 a.m. We'll have a little Q&A after that as well.
All right. Well, I thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely.
And then thank you guys for joining us for the data modeling. We appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.
Take care.